Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Amazing X-Men number 4, cover dated June 1995. The cover is an eye-catching one, it's well designed. It's by Andy Kubert, inked by Matthew Ryan. We've got a focus on Bishop hanging upside down there, and Storm in the foreground, and these laser blasts acting as directional devices to the two characters. Now, I like Andy Kubert's work on this particular cover, but there is a little criticism that I have, which is the foreshortening here on Storm. The way that her hands come towards us in the foreground, they're way too big. So there's something a little bit off about the perspective on Storm there. If you study those hands, especially her right hand here, it's far, far too big. But I do like the upshot on her face. I think that's nicely done, and I like the ciphers he's using for the nose there as well. That's very well done. Okay, so let's open this one up to the first page. We have a sequence of 6 horizontal panels. There is this ritual taking place where this is Bishop strung up upside down. He's being cut in the arm there. Obviously a vein being opened up and the blood is pouring out here into this chalice with these kind of Egyptian hieroglyphic designs on the side. So a little clue as to the nature of this ritual. And then we have this figure here drinking and then passing the cup on. So it's a kind of a parody of the Christian Eucharist here, but with this Egyptian element and dimension. And the narrative captions make plain the location, the consecrated temple of the Madri in what was once the city of Quebec in Canada. So that's as far as Apocalypse's influence stretches. It stretches right into across the Canadian border into the whole of continental North America. That's how far his reach extends. There are hints of ancient Egypt in their song, with the barest suggestion of medieval Europe. It is a song of worship to one who was almost as old as time, Apocalypse. So Apocalypse is the subject of the worship. I like this sequence. I think it is well done in the art by Andy Kubert. You know, he's having to draw a lot of hands here. He's having to make it interesting. I think there's a nice combination of the drawing and the coloring too. Let's turn over the page and we have to turn it sideways to get the whole effect of this double page spread here. Make sure that you can see all of that there on screen. So we've got a full shot of Bishop. He is sort of crucified in a sense, hanging upside down like St. Peter. He's like a religious type martyr. He's going to be sacrificed by these religious nutcases, and their leader here says, "And thus the gene trader Bishop must die." So as I was saying, like, there's some kind of Christian subtext to this ritual, this passing around of the chalice with Bishop's blood, and of course it is all oriented to the worship of Apocalypse. A lot of work on this 2-page spread. Again, I like Andy Kubert's work with the hands and fingers here. That's difficult to do, drawing hands, and he does it very well. So the title of the story is On Consecrated Ground. Look at the crosses here that Richard Starkings has worked into the story title. And the creative team is Fabian Nicieza, plot, Andy Kubert penciler, Matt Ryan inker. Now that's interesting. Fabian Nicieza plot. So that means that Andy Kubert was working from that plot. And there's nothing about the script there, but obviously Nicieza has to have scripted this. But what it indicates is that they were working Marvel style. Nicieza handing off the plot to Kubert, and Kubert coming back with the comics pages and the storytelling. And so there is quite smooth storytelling in this issue. And of course, Nicieza and Kubert have been working for a long time by this stage, about 3 years together. So obviously Nicieza trusts Kubert to do the heavy lifting with the storytelling page by page. Rest of the creative team, Richard Starkings and Comicraft on lettering, Kevin Summers and Digital Chameleon on color art. I think the color art is really good in this issue. I like this kind of orangey yellow background as well. It helps the figures in the foreground to pop. The computer coloring is not muddy, it's not super dark. It complements the black line art really well. So then we continue with this opening section of the comic and this ritual. So the lead, Madri, concludes his traitorous blood, now cleansed by virtue of our whispered song, let it now pour back into this empty vessel, filling it with the power and majesty of its high lord En Sabah Nur. And then it's interrupted. This is a nice little sequence here. The blood is frozen. And where's the sudden cold come from? Anchor image storm. So storm's arrived. We've got a tapestry there, it seems, with Apocalypse worked into it, and all these skulls up here as well. So some nice details from Kubert. She says nothing as she flies down from the window ledge like a dagger of icy steel. To create an Arctic cold front indoors while keeping Bishop protected in a cocoon of warm air is incredibly taxing. And let's continue, but not as exhausting as the rapid generation of hurricane force gusts. I wonder, is all of that necessary? I mean, we're learning what she's doing there, but the whole idea that it's taxing her, could that really be the case with Storm, who is an alpha level mutant? I'm not so sure about that, to be honest with you. Interesting use of the digital coloring here to blur this figure in the foreground so that our attention goes to Storm and Bishop hanging upside down in the background. And Storm, of course, a thief since her youth in Cairo, Egypt, and she pulls out lockpicks. Now that's an interesting detail too, you know. En Sabah Nur, his origins are in ancient Egypt, and Storm is someone who came of age in Egypt as an orphan and taken under the wing of a master thief who taught her the ways of using lockpicks, etc. So she springs Bishop from his what would you call them, like the restraints that have bound him, and of course he's weakened by the blood loss and so on and so forth, but he's relieved that the X-Men are there. And you know, I've been thinking about how Amazing X-Men in particular kind of bounces around. It doesn't really have a through line like some of the other issue or in miniseries have. It kind of moves around. Like the first two issues, the X-Men are involved in helping the airlift of humans from North America to Eurasia, and then it kind of switches focus when Magneto is abducted by Apocalypse and Bishop too. So there isn't as much of a what would I say, like a steady mission and quest in Amazing X-Men, but one of the pieces of continuity or a continuous element of Amazing X-Men is Bishop. So it does focus more on Bishop and Bishop's story, this particular miniseries. So Storm helps him out, and we have an interesting switch of scene here where outside the building we have, as it turns out, Banshee and Quicksilver disguising themselves as members of the Madri, and they take out this particular porter here in front of the entrance to the temple. Interesting image there of Apocalypse on the, what is it, like a bronze door or something like that. And an interesting use of Banshee's powers. So Quicksilver states it aloud so we the readers can learn how Banshee has taken out the porter here. Quicksilver says, hypersonic signal, right? It scrambled the fluids in his inner ear, rendering him unconscious. Good work, Sean. Very subtle. And that is a feature of the Age of Apocalypse miniseries, that we see these characters that we're so familiar with in the Prime reality, and we see them using their powers in more inventive, more aggressive and assertive ways. And that's certainly very interesting. So it's almost like there's more powerful versions of the X-Men and associated mutant teams in the Age of Apocalypse reality, because Apocalypse has this ethos of the strong survive, and so you have to be strong to have survived the 20 years of the Age of Apocalypse and his ascension as High Lord. And then they bust into this room where they find the origin of the Madri. It's Jamie Madrox. It's the original Jamie Madrox, the host body from whom the Madri duplicates originated. The one true Jamie Madrox, as Quicksilver says. And look at here, he's a dribbling, mentally broken man. And we have the indication here with the toy blocks and the rattle and the doll. and all of that. So he really looks like he has had a bad 10 or 20 years here used by Apocalypse. Interesting too, again, Andy Kubert playing around with the toes on the feet of the character. He's done that before. He did it with Legion on one of the covers prior to the Age of Apocalypse issues. And I like it, but it's gone a bit wrong here in respect of Jamie's right hand and right leg. So you can see the fingers going through the toes. That's an interesting idea, but the toes are way too splayed there. It doesn't make sense, and those toes look like fingers rather than toes. So again, just the anatomy is off there, and it's because he's drawing it out of his head rather than drawing from life. If he had some life drawing reference for this, we wouldn't be looking at it like that. He'd get it right. So it's interesting. It reveals that he's drawing out of his head, number one, and also that sometimes it goes wrong, as on the cover with the perspective, and here too with the fingers through the toes. Interesting idea though. So they tried to assist Jamie here, and the moral quandary they find themselves facing is whether they're going to kill him in order to stop the duplicates. Then the scene shifts to the remains of the Xavier estate in what's left of Westchester County. And this picks up after the end of Astonishing X-Men number 4. So that cohort of X-Men led by Rogue are back, they return. And this is also a point where the Generation Next survivors return as well to Westchester. They arrive having succeeded in finding Illyana, Colossus's sister, and bringing her successfully to the X-Mansion, because that's the mission that Magneto tasked Colossus and Shadowcat with in Generation Next number 1, but at a high cost. All of their students, all of the Generation Next team members, all dead except for Colossus and Shadowcat, so all sacrificed their lives to get Illyana out of the facility on the West Coast. So here on this particular page, I think you can see that, and also maybe even on this page too, I'm starting to feel like Andy Kubert is up against a deadline for this issue, and I feel that some of the pages are a little bit rushed. Some of the artwork is a little sketchier than we might be used to, and I think therefore he's doing breakdowns, and I think that Matt Ryan is under the deadline gun as well on some of these pages. So I see it here with the rendering of Rogue, and also the other X-Men coming in here out of Blink's teleportal. Also this figure of Rogue here, this particular panel, all the characters are a little bit sketchy, not fully defined. So again, that implies to me that deadline crunch is affecting the art here. So everybody gets caught up here in terms of how their missions went, and Rogue alights here. She's gotten the news about the abduction of her son in the final issue of Amazing X-Men, so she knows about that. And she asks Colossus, what happened, where are your students? And he says, they didn't make it. Shadowcat says nothing, and if you can see my review of Generation Next number 4 and see what happened in that issue, and how Colossus's decisions as leader very likely led to the death of his students. But Illyana is safe there, and Magneto needs her in order to check, in order to potentially undo the Age of Apocalypse, because Illyana has latent chronal abilities, time control abilities. So Blink is shocked that all of the students are dead, and she says, I should have been with them. But Morph makes the point, just be glad you're still alive, Clarice, we are. And Rogue here, this is an interesting little moment. I like this moment. Rogue here goes up to Shadowcat to commiserate with her and to console her, and she puts her gloved hand, of course, on Shadowcat's shoulder, but Shadowcat goes intangible, and she says, they're dead, Rogue, can't waste time crying, there are no tears left, are there? let's worry about the living. Magneto and your son can still be saved. So just these grimmer, darker versions of these characters in the Age of Apocalypse reality. And again, I like the storytelling in the panels here on the bottom page, but again, the art just looks that little bit sketchier, a little less definition and rendering on the characters. So here, Rogue, Sabretooth and Wildchild go down into the tunnels beneath the X-Mansion, looking for any traces of Charles, her boy, her son with Magneto. She's brought these two in particular down because they've got very honed olfactory senses, sense of smell. Maybe they can pick up a scent. And then, of course, Sabretooth realizes that something's coming towards them. I like the spotting of blacks there on Sabretooth's arm and chest and face. That's nicely done. There's a light in the distance at the end of the tunnel. And there's a little bit of a mismatch here between the dialogue and Rogue's smile here. You're back, but Charles, you don't have Charles. So that doesn't match. That image doesn't match. And again, interesting. I think they were under time pressure. Nicieza handing off a plot, probably having to dialogue this under time pressure, and just not being able to do 100% maybe what he might otherwise do if he had more time in order to make the dialogue and the images in some cases match a little bit better. So here we have Gambit back with his team from the Gambit and the External series, and he was tasked with finding the Macran crystal, or a shard of the Macran crystal. How did that go? Well, he gets punched out of the tunnels, out into the garden, and Rogue is enraged because she's learned that Gambit had her son, but he's still alive. But I had no choice. I had to let the kid go. Go where? With who? She's asking him as she's winding up to give him another punch. Start talking, Gambit, and for your sake, it better be good and it better be the truth, or I swear by all I hold holy, I'll kill you. So what's happened there? Well, we'll find out a little bit later. First of all, we have a scene switch back to Quebec, and Storm and Bishop, nice anchor image there of the two using their powers in tandem to take out the Madri and escape from the temple there. And then there's a scene switch to Jamie Madrox, and he's basically telling Quicksilver and Banshee that they have to kill him. Kill me, and my replicants, the Madri, will be left empty shells with no souls. So that's the moral dilemma. And just as the two boys there are thinking about what it's going to cost them if they kill Jamie, an innocent who's been abused and used by Apocalypse, who arrives except for Abyss. And as I've said before, in respect of Abyss's appearances in Amazing X-Men, I really like Andy Kubert's design of this character. I think he's got a really interesting design, but he's got a very annoying style of dialogue. He talks like a cartoon character, makes you think you're all just sinking body and soul deeper and deeper into the abyss. I'm back, he says. Like, he's got kind of cartoonish character, which, yeah, I don't know that it fits exactly. I'd like him to kind of match his visuals here. This is a great visual of the character. He looks really monstrous. There's elements of his face that are reminiscent a little bit of Venom, let's say. The big teeth, the no nose, that kind of triangular face down to his teeth. It's a little bit reminiscent of Venom, but he's got a really cool design. Just a pity that his characterization isn't as... it doesn't match the visual as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, now their situation has been complicated by the fact that they have to think quick in respect of what they're going to do about Madrox, and they've got this other challenge to deal with here, the Abyss. So Quicksilver doesn't want to kill Madrox, and the Abyss here starts taunting Quicksilver about Bishop and Storm. He says to Quicksilver, "You seem surprised. I know how you felt about Storm, Pete." And just that kind of disrespectful way of addressing Pietro is interesting. "Don't be," he says. because I know what's in the darkest, deepest corners of all your minds. I can feel both your friends losing hope, losing strength, getting more and more desperate with each passing second. And take your friend, the Banshee, know what he's afraid of? And this is an interesting bit. I'm not sure that this has really been set up too well, but anyway, the Abyss says he's terrified of dying and living and everything in between. Ain't that right, Irish? And Banshee responds, show me a man with no fears, Abyss, and I'll show you a fool. Oh, good one, Sean. Here's the gig, the way it's being played out, Quicksilver. Your gal pal and her bulldog, the Bishmeister, are about 5 minutes away from dying, and there's not a thing you and your coward of a pal can do to stop it. Vegas odds say you're dead. I don't know what to make of this. There's nothing so far in any of Banshee's appearances in the Age of Apocalypse that indicate that he's a coward, that he's afraid of dying and living. So I'm just a little bit baffled about this. Are we just supposed to take Abyss on trust in terms of what he's saying? Or am I missing something there? And then what I do find interesting visually here is this ribbon that emerges out of his mouth. I think this is supposed to be his tongue. It's a little bit unclear. I think the colorist, Kevin Summers, if he'd indicated here beneath the tip of the tongue in the same color, it might be a little clearer what's going on. But it's an interesting idea of Kubert's to have that tongue emerging out in that ribbon-like form as well. Okay, so let's continue. So Banshee is going to act not like a coward would. He's going to use his power on Abyss to destroy him finally. I really like this image here, and I like the way that Kubert is drawing Banshee's mouth here. It's open, it's extended. I like the way that the mouth is open down below the line of the gums here, the way the teeth are rendered. It's just very interesting, kind of an organic way the mouth is opened as well. So Banshee basically says, I hate what this world's become and how little it offers, but I won't ever stop trying to make it a better place, even if it means sacrificing my own life that someone else might have a chance to live. And believe me, Abyss, a lot of lives will improve if you're not around. So Quicksilver implores Banshee not to sacrifice himself. He says here, the X-Men need you. I need you. Don't do this, Sean. But Sean is determined. So he goes right into Abyss's body, and he uses obviously his sonic scream here on Abyss. So this is really well drawn. In particular, I think this is very well drawn. Good perspective and foreshortening on this version of Banshee. Now, what's going on here in terms of the coloring is we've got a clash of the two characters' costume colors. They have the exact same colors. That dark blue or navy and the yellow, both of them are wearing the same color. So it could potentially be a little bit confusing visually here, but it's not. But this maybe is, in terms of where's Banshee, where's Abyss. But the end result is clear here. The slithering tendrils completely engulf Banshee, but the sonic screams emanating from within the horseman's body are loud enough to tear Abyss apart. Now, he's been torn apart before, or apparently killed before, most recently in issue 2 of this particular miniseries, and he comes back. So is it possible to kill him? That's an open question. Quicksilver runs off with Madrox. So how is that story point going to be resolved? Well, there's an explosion, the entire temple comes down, and Quicksilver races past the falling masonry, but he can't outrun the pain in his heart and the heaviness in his soul over the loss of a man who'd been like a brother to him. So he gets Madrox out alive, and Quicksilver says, I'll go back in to help Bishop and Storm. So here they are, they're still taking on the Madri, but then suddenly that difficulty is resolved because Madrox here just decides to die. He says, here, I can shut the Madri down. They're parts of my soul, but it will take everything I have. And now free of that place, I will take their lives, even if it means my own. In this way, I can stab at Apocalypse's heart. I like that. I like that bit of dialogue there. Quicksilver's telling him not to give in, don't let Apocalypse win, but Madrox just decides to die. And the Madri drop to the ground. And Bishop says their eyes seem lifeless, their bodies like empty shells. That's because their originator, the number one, Jamie Madrox, has just killed himself by an act of will, which is a little bit bizarre. So minutes pass. We see the wreckage and the ruins of the temple, the town there in the background, and Quicksilver just standing here in deep shadow at the front of his body. That's nicely done. So there's a hug here between Pietro and Aurora because they have romantic feelings for each other in this Age of Apocalypse reality. Bishop here saying, and what of this one here? Because he hasn't seen Madrox before. So Madrox is dead. And Quicksilver says his name was Jamie Madrox and he sacrificed his life for us as well. 2 good men are dead. I'm tired, he says to Storm, tired of seeing lives ruined, potential wasted. I can't believe life was supposed to be like this. Humanity was not supposed to suffer this way. We were meant for more. We had to be. We will be. I swear it, he determined. So Quicksilver hasn't lost heart. He's not in despair. He's got that heroic hope in his heart. But here in the foreground, I have another criticism, I'm afraid, of Andy Kubert's art here. And that is, this is a very weird pose for a man who's supposed to be dead. His arm is elevated here. His left arm is elevated, as is his right arm. That is not a body that is dead. A dead body would be flat on the ground, unless aspects of the body, limbs, were propped up by something. But how can his arms be raised like this and he be dead? It doesn't make sense. And again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. I have a feeling that there was a time crunch on this one. Nicieza handing the plot off to Kubert, and then the dialogue. I wonder, was the dialogue done in advance of the art being received and then applied by the letterer Richard Starkings? But something's not quite right on 1 or 2 of these pages. Then we're back to the Xavier estate. Remember, Rogue punched Gambit out from the tunnels up to the grounds of the X-Mansion. Again, this is another page, and this is a panel in particular where I think the art is a little bit rushed. The characters look a little bit sketchy. And so we find out here what happened with Charles and what went on in the Gambit and the Externals series. So it was Guido, a strong guy, who took Rogue's child, and Gambit says here he was the only one who could have brought your baby out of that mess alive. He had no choice, Rogue, says Dazzler. At least Charles is still alive. We can still save him. So Rogue is deeply upset. And then another mini-series now connects with Amazing X-Men, and it's the arrival now of Nightcrawler and Destiny. So Magneto's orders to Generation Next, to Colossus, and to Nightcrawler, they're coming together. Bits of his plans are coming together. And Nightcrawler asks here, where's Bishop? So there we go. The ship arrives. Quicksilver and Storm emerge. That's nicely done. And here's Bishop. So he's shaking hands there with Colossus. And Rogue here says to Pietro, we haven't gotten your father or brother back yet. We will, Rogue. I promise you we will. So this is an interesting characterization of Quicksilver. Quicksilver in the Prime reality is a little bit of a pessimist. He isn't such a hopeful character. And here in the grim, dark world of the Age of Apocalypse, he is the hopeful one. That's interesting. That's intriguing. This is a good double page spread. So I do think some of the pages Andy Kubert was a little bit rushed, but he took his time on this one because it's a double page spread, and it's really nice here with Sabretooth and Wildchild here in the foreground. And then we've got this cool team shot of Generation Next, Amazing X-Men, United now, Gambit there too, Dazzler. I think it would have been good if we could have had Nightcrawler there as well, but it's good enough. So Quicksilver sums up here. He says, and now Creed, we have to regain that piece of the Macran crystal, rescue Magneto and my brother, And then we do what the X-Men have always done. We give our all, our lives, to make sure this is the day Apocalypse falls. So here we go. We're winding up to X-Men Omega, on sale this week. So this must have come out. Yeah, that's why there was such a deadline. That's why there's a little bit of rushing going on in this issue, and why there's a few panels, like I pointed out, where there's a mismatch between the dialogue and the art, because there wasn't time to go back, there wasn't time to correct things because of the schedule. They had to get this out so that it would be out, and readers could read it before reading X-Men Omega, because they're out the same week. Very interesting. Nice work here in the background. The digital coloring by Kevin Summers, really, really good work by him. Yeah, there you go. So we're almost at the denouement, the climax, X-Men Omega. The Age of Apocalypse about to come to an end. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on The Amazing X-Men number 4. If you did, please like the video on YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.